Hello, this is Todd Luck, and I recently got my 2025 cat calendar in the mail. That must be what this is. There's a cat on the cover. But seriously, this is a review of the Frazetta and Burroughs Masters of Adventure 2025 calendar. This features the cover paintings of the legendary Frank Frazetta that were on the covers of books written by the equally legendary Edgar Rice Burroughs. I ordered this from FrazettaGirls.com, and for those who aren't familiar with Frazetta Girls, it's founded by Frank Frazetta's granddaughter and daughter, and they are trying to keep their father's legacy alive, and they've got new comics on there and art prints and t-shirts. Whatever you want with their father's work on it, you can get at FrazettaGirls.com. The calendar shipped in a very sturdy mailer to make sure it wasn't damaged. And I also ended up getting a card on here with a code for 15% off of the next purchase I make on FrazettaGirls.com. It's even got a little Frank Frazetta sketch on there, which is kind of cool. And I also got a sticker for Creepy, which is a magazine that Frank Frazetta used to do the covers for. And they have creepy merchandise. They've got t-shirts and art prints and pins with those covers on them. This is a limited edition calendar, but it is still available to order as of the recording of this video. So this is the way it came. And when I looked at the back, I was a little mystified. I'm like, what is this? But it's actually an envelope. This is a flap that you're going to pull up very carefully. And your calendar will be inside of the envelope. And the flap has enough give that you can easily just put it back into the folder, and you can reinsert the calendar back in here and just keep it and store it like this. And so here's what the calendar actually looks like, and it has the same cover as the folder, and it looks great. This is a very striking image. It's very simple, but very iconic, and it indicates kind of the subject matter inside that, you know, this is an art calendar, and this is not necessarily an all ages art calendar. This is probably not something you want to hang up in your kindergarten class. And even though you order this online, they still have the information about the calendar and what's on each month on the back, just like a regular calendar. And I think it looks great. It's just really neat to see all this stuff on the back. And I don't know, I think it's a very nice design. The cover is very thick, very sturdy. And the same is true for the paper inside. I don't know how to portray this on a video. I mean, if I move the page, you can kind of hear how thick it is, but just take my word on it. This is the thickest paper stock and cover stock I've ever seen on a calendar. It is super durable, super hard to tear or mess up. It's even fingerprint resistant. I'm holding this thing and I'm just not leaving any fingerprints. It's great. And it does have holes already punched in it. And before I got it, I was thinking like, man, I would never hang a $30 art calendar because calendars tend to get messed up if you hang them. But this is so durable. I think you can hang this with a thumbtack or a nail or whatever. I think it'll be just fine. And another thing that's hard to do on a video like this is to show you the calendar fully opened unless you're doing a TikTok video. But I just wanted to give you a couple examples of what it looks like opened. As you can see, it's going to look really good hanging on your wall if that's what you want to do with it. And just in case you're wondering, that Frazetta Conan shirt I'm wearing is, of course, officially licensed from Frazetta Girls, and I got that one off of Amazon. Now, the calendar part of this calendar is very plain, right? It doesn't even have any denotions of holidays or anything like that. So it's just a very basic calendar. Maybe they left off the holidays because they want you to kind of make up your own Frazetta-related holidays. You know, you could have Death Dealer Day or Dawn Attack Memorial Day, Mothman Awareness Week. But obviously what you're interested in is the artwork, and we're going to go over that for each month. But first, I wanted to speak about Edgar Rice Burroughs, because not everyone has read his works. So Edgar Rice Burroughs is the creator of Tarzan and John Carter of Mars. And what a lot of people don't know is that he was a very prolific writer. He wrote over 80 books in various different genres. And his novels are old, right? They're somewhere between 75 to over 100 years old. But his work is so influential, right? We still use the tropes from his stories in today's pop culture. And what I find is that, yes, we do have a lot of great modern science fiction and fantasy stories, but a lot of it just keeps using these tropes over and over again, copying a copy until it kind of loses what made it special in the first place. And sometimes it's really great to go back to those old original works when that stuff was still fresh and new. And there's certainly some dated language and ideas in some of his works, but for the most part, the stuff is as relevant today as it was back then. And that's because while the world has drastically changed since Edgar Rice Burroughs wrote his novels, human nature has not. And that's really what his novels capture so well. He was the master of action and suspense. He was a master world builder. You know, every novel had new monsters or new civilizations, new worlds. And he just had this talent to write characters and situations that no matter where you live or what decade you're reading it in, it still resonates with you. And if you're interested in Edgar Rice Burroughs, I did a video on Edgar Rice Burroughs related sales that are going on right now. And it really is a buying guide to all the stuff that's out there right now, including the big sale they have on edgarriceburroughs.com on novels and graphic novels and a Joe Jusko art book. And that sale goes through January 6th. But I think the very best way to orient yourself very quickly and very cheaply to all things Edgar Rice Burroughs is to subscribe to their online comic strips. That's $22 a year for 19 strips. Most of them are adapting Burroughs' novels, and it contains every property we're about to talk about in this calendar and so many more. And so I'm going to go down the artwork for each month and give a little bit of context for the novel or series that it comes from. And I'm not saying that the paintings here are 100% accurate to what's in the novels. That's not the point of a cover artist, right? A cover artist, uses artistic license and is really trying to capture the feeling of that novel. And I think Frazetta does that very well. All right, so first up we have Taynar of Pellucidar, a very simple but very effective image, very powerful image. And so Taynar is a native of Pellucidar at the Earth's core. It's a prehistoric world. And so I believe this is the third novel in that series. All right, and next up we have A Princess of Mars. And this is the cover for the first John Carter of Mars novel. John Carter has obviously had a movie in recent years. He's had a lot of comics. It's well worth checking out, all of that. And so I've read a lot of the Mars novels. They're fantastic. It's a world where you have, guys in harnesses running around on airships with swords and blasters, fighting four-armed Martians. It's just really, really cool stuff. And this is one of Frazetta's most iconic and imitated images. It is very, very appropriate to include in this calendar. And so next up is The Moon Maid, and this wins the prize for least accurate painting for a novel. However, it's not Frazetta's fault. So this guy is not a centaur. However, this guy has been portrayed as a centaur in every Moon Maid cover since the very first printing about 100 years ago. So Frazetta was just following in a tradition that goes back a long way, and he created his own spin on it and made a fantastic piece of work. The princess also shouldn't be naked, but that's just Frazetta being Frazetta. So the Moon Maid is actually set inside of an alien jungle world inside of the moon. And so there's some astronauts who get stranded there in the first Moon Maid novel, but it's a trilogy. And what gets really wild is in the next two parts of that trilogy, the aliens inside of the moon come down to Earth and they conquer it. And then society just collapses and we lose all technology and humanity is riding around on horseback fighting the moon men and stuff like that. And it's just really epic stuff. It's considered by many to be one of Edgar Rice Burroughs' best works. And by the way, this is the first version of the Moon Maid painting. This is one of those paintings that Frazetta did repaint and do a second version of, and that version is actually owned by director Robert Rodriguez. Next up is Lost on Venus, which is the second Carson of Venus novel. And Venus is this very lush, colorful world with all kinds of crazy wild beasts on it. And I think Frazetta does a great job of capturing that. And on Venus, pretty much anything goes, right? In this novel alone, Carson of Venus deals with a super scientific society that executes anyone who doesn't have perfect genetics, and a villain who has like an army of zombies. I mean, it's pretty wild. And so next up is Savage Pellucidar, which is the cover for the calendar, and again is a very simple but effective image. And so this is a book that was actually not published in Burroughs' lifetime. It contains short stories set in Pellucidar that Burroughs wrote, and Pellucidar was a very popular series. It had a lot of different books in it. Speaking of which, it's another Pellucidar image. This is Land of Terror. And so this is a unique Pellucidar cover because oftentimes Pellucidar covers have very minimal backgrounds or are set in caves, and so you actually don't get to see what Pellucidar looks like. And so Pellucidar is this prehistoric tropical world that lines the inside of the Earth. And so unlike the surface of the Earth where we have a horizon line, the horizon on Pellucidar actually slopes upward. And so that is a very challenging thing to do artistically, and I do admire Frazetta for trying to show Pellucidar in all of its glory. And you've got, your inhabitants there, and you've got dinosaurs and a saber-toothed tiger, and it's a really cool image. Speaking of impressive images, here is Carson of Venus. This is actually the third Carson of Venus novel. I know it's creatively named. That just happens sometimes. There's a Tarzan novel called Lord of the Jungle, and so this is a really beautiful image. I'm just going to let you enjoy some of the details as I talk about this novel. And so a lot of the times, Burroughs would use his other worlds as political satire. And so this is a novel in which essentially Carson of Venus goes up against Space Hitler. This has like parodies of Nazis that he goes on an undercover mission to try to stop. And so it's pretty epic stuff and a very interesting novel. All right, next up is The Cave Girl, and this is another very simple but effective image. So iconic. I wonder how many people have this as a tattoo. So The Cave Girl is a story of, yet another average Joe who gets stranded on an island with prehistoric cave people, and a native girl falls in love with him. But it puts some twists on those old tropes that Burroughs likes to use, in the fact that the guy who gets stranded on the island is very bookish and he isn't very equipped to deal with the savage stuff that he comes across. But this native girl who falls for him mistakes him for a great warrior. And so it's really, kind of putting a twist and parodying some of those tropes that Burroughs likes to use in his novels. Another really great one, The People That Time Forgot. And so this is the second novelette in the Land That Time Forgot series. And right now, this image is actually going to be on the cover for a trade paperback of Land That Time Forgot comics. And it's available in the Land That Time Forgot Fearless Kickstarter that runs through December 22nd. So be sure to check that out. Those are some really good comics. And The Land That Time Forgot is this lost continent set in the Antarctic that is mysteriously tropical and has cavemen and dinosaurs and all that good stuff in it. And of course is the inspiration for Marvel's Savage Land. And incidentally, I also just did a review of the Land That Time Forgot movie, including a little bit about the sequel, The People That Time Forgot, and its Frazetta connection. So you might want to check that out too. And for October, we of course have Monster Men. Frazetta, of course, is no stranger to horror. Burroughs didn't write a whole lot of horror, but he did have a lot of horror aspects in his stories with monsters and a lot of suspense. And so it was natural for him to write a story about a scientist who goes to a jungle island to try to create artificial men, and they don't come out quite right, and instead they're monster men. And so it's a novel that Burroughs did. He only did one novel, but there is a sequel to it coming out, and there are comics following up on it that are also quite good. Next up is this absolutely gorgeous piece for The Return of the Mucker. I love the color in this one, and I love the kinetic energy. I mean, this poor guy is just so screwed. And so the Mucker is an interesting character because he's kind of an anti-hero. He's a ruffian who would normally be a villainous thug in most of Burroughs' works, but, Burroughs tended to write his villains in a way that a lot of them, if put in the right circumstances, will end up doing the right thing. And so I'm not as familiar with The Return of the Mucker, but I will say the original Mucker novel is a Quentin Tarantino movie waiting to happen. And finally, for December, we have The Mad King. And so this is one of Burroughs' more unusual novels. So it's set in the modern day, and this normal guy goes to a fictional European country to take a vacation. And he finds out he's a dead ringer for the king, which normally isn't a big deal, but the king is supposed to be in an insane asylum, and so people are after him because they think he escaped from the asylum. But it gets more complicated as we start to question if the king should be in the asylum or if he was put there by his enemies who are trying to take over the country. And so it's a great political thriller and probably the closest Burroughs got to writing something like 24. And then we have a mysteriously blank final page that just has the logos for Frazetta Girls and Edgar Rice Burroughs Inc. on it. And the reason for that, and I'm going to use this Marvel calendar as an example, if you're doing a 12-month calendar, you're going to have 13 pages, and so you'll oftentimes see calendars say that they're 16-month calendars, and then you'll open it up, and there's a page that just has this dinky little thing for the previous 4 months, right? The last 4 months of the current year, which are completely useless to you because you bought this either in late December or early January, and so this is in the past. However, this is an opportunity to use that 13th page to give you an extra image for the calendar. And so if they decide to do this again, I would like to see them use that 13th page for something. And I'm not saying I need a so-called 16-month calendar, but just put something there. I mean, obviously there are other paintings. You could use frontispieces that Frazetta did in pen and ink for the Burroughs novels. I mean, there's a lot of possibilities. So this is a fantastic calendar, and I'm so glad I got it, worth every penny. But I do have a few things I would have liked to have seen in here. One is, of course, Tarzan. He's Edgar Rice Burroughs' most famous creation, so including at least one Tarzan piece would have been great. Another thing is, and this is just a personal preference, is I would have actually liked to have seen this as a calendar without nudity in it, because I just don't feel comfortable hanging this or displaying this in mixed company because of the subject matter of some of those paintings. And Frazetta just has so many different works to choose from that he did for the Burroughs novels that you could have easily come up with 12 images that didn't have a bare female nipple in them. And just some minor QC issues for them to take care of if they do this next time. I did have some mysterious lines that were indented into the front and back cover. It's not a big deal because I can't see them unless I shine the light on them, but it is kind of weird, and that's something they can certainly take care of for next time if there is one. And there's also this mysterious crease that's on one page, and I'm not sure how that happened, but again, not a big deal because I can't see it unless I shine the light directly on it. Again, just pointing out those QC issues in case they do this again. And I do hope they put out another calendar because this is great. This is exactly the sort of thing I like to see with the Burroughs properties. And I'd love to see other calendars put out with artwork from other Burroughs artists. I think that would be awesome. All right, guys, like and subscribe for more videos. And until next time, see ya.